Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special conversation about COVID-19 and where we are. Ever since the pandemic started in March of 2020, we've done our best to keep you informed so that you could make wise decisions. And today is one of those days when we are going to bring some very important information to you to help you as you move forward. And this program is being brought to you by the Mount Zion Baptist Church and the Conference of National Black Churches. And I'm honored today to have with me as my special guest one of the most knowledgeable men that I know when it comes to COVID-19, and that's Dr. Derek Hurd. Dr. Hurd, welcome.
Pastor Simmons, how are you doing today?
Doing good. And Dr. Hurd, I want to get started. For those in our audience that don't know who you are, if you would give us a little information about yourself, and then talk about what your role has been at Phoebe during the pandemic to help us understand what you bring to the table today.
Well, Pastor, again, as you said, my name is Derek Hurd. I am from Leesburg, Georgia. I was graduated Lee County High School, class of 91. Then I went to Albany State University and graduated from there in 95. And then I went to the Medical College of Georgia and graduated from there in 1999. And decided to come back home to practice family medicine. And so I've been in practice since 2002 in family medicine. I joined Phoebe in 2011. And then in 2018, I was asked to be the medical director for primary care for the physician group. And as it pertains to COVID, my role as medical director for primary care put me kind of in the forefront of the COVID response because we had to determine what we would be doing in terms of our outpatient treatment of COVID. Would we be seeing patients in the hospital? You know, how would we get patients, in the clinics, how would we get people tested for COVID? And those sort of things. So I was a part of their strategic team on the physician group side of how we're going to deal with COVID.
Yeah. And I want to commend you for that effort because I saw up close and personal just the sheer numbers of the people that you all saw and how you managed that whole process. And in addition to just managing the numbers, how you managed information to the community, keeping us up to date about what was going on, and then reaching out to families who had been impacted to make a difference. I saw your heart as you all delivered services in that area.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I was really struck by with our organization was that we had never seen this before. Mm-hmm. And to be able to come together, put together teams of people to become kind of action committees of how to get things done. I was just blown away by our ability to do that. Whether it was standing up a testing site, a mobile testing site, which had not been done before, being able to call patients, get them in for treatment, whether it was setting up the vaccine sites. Our team, I think, really did a good job. And for me, I felt good working for that kind of organization and being able to do that for my community, because this is home for me.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Got basically 3 questions today that we want to explore. And if anything else comes up out of it, we'll move toward it. But here's the first question. Our Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, President Biden, a few days ago, made this statement: the pandemic is over. COVID is still with us, but the pandemic is over. Help us, from your perspective, to understand that statement.
Well, President Biden is correct. You know, if we're looking at the term or the definition of a pandemic, the pandemic actually is over because there's not widespread and uncontrolled spread of the disease anymore. But we need to make sure that we understand this. Just because there's not widespread spread of the disease doesn't mean that it's not still being spread. Okay. And I think that's what people kind of get when, that was the fear that I had when I heard those words, that people would take it that, oh, COVID is completely over. Mm-hmm. No, we still need to make sure that we're doing those things to mitigate the spread of that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it later on, but that's going to be continuing to wash our hands, continuing to make sure that when we're in large crowds that we're taking not taking risk of getting too familiar, too close, and not having those safeguards in place. Making sure that we're getting vaccinated. You know, I think we're still dealing with the fact that we still have some people who have yet to be vaccinated. And so I think we're at 2 years now. I got my first vaccination December of 20.
Okay.
And so we're almost at 2 years of the vaccines being available. So we need to make sure that we're availing ourselves of that. And then most importantly, understanding that although we may not be in the pandemic where everyone is sick and you're worried about everyone being sick and you're saying, well, I can go to restaurants now. You can go to restaurants now, but you need to be safe because we truly don't know when there's someone that's sick and when we don't know when someone isn't sick. The symptoms have changed over from the initial iteration of COVID now to the Omicron variant that we have. The symptoms have changed. It started out with severe shortness of breath and cough. Then it evolved to then having GI symptoms where you're having diarrhea and things of that nature. Then you started having issues with nasal congestion, sore throat, cough. And so you have to be aware of all these things and not just assume that just because I have a sniffle that's an allergy or that's just a regular cold, and it could be COVID. So we have to make sure that if we are having symptoms, that we're not going out into the public space where we could get people sick. And if we do have to go out into a public space, making sure that we're being kind and still using masks. Because again, someone could be someone could have COVID and they may not necessarily be presenting the way that we think that they should present.
Okay. And you said a lot of important things, but let me just pull out 2 or 3 of them. One is the spread is not widespread, but it's still spreading. And to anyone who's out there listening, if you end up contracting COVID, because you're in a place where it happens to be, people may not be as sick, but they're still going to get sick.
Oh, yes, sir. I got some data right before I came over because I wanted to have the most up-to-date. We currently have 12 people that are still in our hospital system that have COVID, that have been admitted with COVID. One of them is in the ICU, but that's because of long-haul COVID things, not still infectious in the ICU, but the complications from COVID has them in the ICU. But we have 11 other patients who were admitted with COVID. The Department of Public Health has said over the last 2 weeks there have been 70 confirmed cases in Dougherty County. Now, that's not the zenith that we had where we were having thousands of people a day being diagnosed, but you still have 70 people that have confirmed cases. And that means they went to the Department of Public Health or they went to the hospital and got tested. We know that people are going and testing at home because we have the ability to do home tests now. Those aren't necessarily being captured by those statistics that I just gave you. So there is still COVID in the area, but we are having to learn to live with COVID. Sort of like we have learned to live with the flu over the years. Influenza is still prevalent every year. We've learned to live with that, and so that's what we're going to have to do with COVID. And going back to what President Biden was saying, or what he was trying to get out, I think that's what he was saying, that, okay, we're going to have to now learn to live with the fact that COVID's there. And so those things that we were talking about, we need to make sure that we're doing.
Okay. You also mentioned how the symptoms have changed, and obviously the protocol for treatment. So, for example, in the past, if you had COVID, you had to stay in until you got a negative test, and you had to be quarantined. And now we're at a place where that protocol has changed. And I'm hearing 5 days in some instances, and I'm even hearing people who say that they were told, okay, you've got it, you may test positive for 30 days, 60, 90, but after 5, 7 days, it's okay, even though you're still testing positive, to go back out and mingle with the public.
So in science, as we learn, we do better. And so when it first came out in 2020, we had no idea what this would mean and how long would people be sick. But now we've gotten data because we've been in this going almost 3 years now. So what we know that when someone is infected with COVID, their time of being able to get people sick is generally going to be somewhere between 5 to 10 days.
Okay.
All right. So when they say that, hey, the CDC is saying that, if you test positive, you can go back to being in public in 5 days, what they're saying is that the likelihood of you having enough virus in you to get someone else sick has dropped significantly enough that you can go back out in public. Also, with the treatments that we have out now, we have medications that can actually treat COVID, particularly in those patients that are high risk. Medicines like Paxlovid, we can actually reduce the replication of the virus such that someone is not going to get sick enough that they can get you sick. So if you and I are sitting here today and I had COVID 5 days ago, it's going to be less likely that I'm going to get you sick because, one, I would have been treated or should have been treated. And then, two, there's not enough virus in me that if I do cough, it's going to be enough that when you inhale it, that it's going to get you sick.
You just taught me something that didn't know that. Another question out of the conversation, you talked about vaccinations. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to the person that says, well, vaccines are not important anymore because you don't get as sick, not worried about dying? So why take a vaccine at this point in the COVID pandemic that we're no longer in?
Well, vaccines are still very important. When we talk about the advancement that we've made in terms of people being less sick, what we're really saying is that the virus is not replicating in bodies as much as it was. Well, part of that is because, one, people either have gotten COVID, or two, they've been immunized against COVID. Now, people will say, well, if I've gotten COVID, why should I still get vaccinated? Well, the problem is what we are finding out, and again, we are still learning about this, but what we're finding is that once you have been infected with COVID, you're going to build natural immunity. Your body is going to do what God intended for it to do, which was to build up antibodies to fight off that virus. But we know that those antibodies are starting to fall off somewhere between 3 to 6 months, so that you can then potentially get sick again. Now, we can't say everyone's going to be different. Everyone's immune system is not going to be 100% the exact same as the person next to them. But on average, we know that it's going to be about 3 to 6 months that you're going to get natural immunity from catching COVID. What we can say is that with the vaccine, we can more clearly denote how long you're going to get a good immunity from that. And so that's why we're wanting people to get vaccinated, because, again, the more you're vaccinated, the less likely you are to get or contract COVID. And if you don't contract COVID, then that's less likely that the virus will have a chance to mutate, because it has to be inside of someone for it to change so that it can then go and infect another host. And so the more people that we can stop getting it or contracting it, the less likely it will be to mutate, and we won't get another variant.
Okay. And so it's important then for just the general population to get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Speak to us about people like myself, over 65 years of age, other health issues. How critical is it for people like me to be vaccinated?
Extremely important. Albany was the kind of the epicenter or the test site for people with varying health conditions getting very sick from COVID. And what we can say is that Omicron has not been as bad a variant as the original or Delta was in terms of deaths. Mm-hmm. But we don't know that if you contract Omicron, that it will not mutate inside of you and then cause a problem later on. But for those people who are elderly, or those people like myself who have sickle cell, those people who are diabetic, those people who have heart disease, who've had strokes, your immune systems just don't work as well. Your immune system just does not work as well. So the fact that you catch it means that you are putting yourself at higher risk of getting serious disease. So that a young person who's 22, 23, who catches Omicron, they may have no symptoms, they may just have a sniffle. The older person, the person with a compromised immune system, could potentially still end up in the hospital. Remember, I just said we have 12 people right now that are in the hospital who have COVID. So that means that people are still getting sick enough that they have to be put in. And we're not seeing as many deaths, but that doesn't mean that deaths are at zero. And I think that's what the public needs to understand, that we're still seeing people that are dying from COVID. It's just not to the number that we saw back in the early days of the pandemic.
Right. And one of the risks for me around the age and the other factors that may contribute was people like my mother, who's 96, and of course like myself, but I was thinking of my mother in particular, and people like her who've got grandchildren, who are the 20-somethings and the teenagers, and they're out there, and that they may have COVID, do fine, but you go home for Thanksgiving, and I saw that. You go home for Christmas, you go to the wedding, and the older person whose immune system is compromised got sick and died.
Yes. And Pastor, I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but I think back to my own family, and this is not HIPAA, I'm not breaking any HIPAA laws because it's my family, but we had a situation last December where we had family members come home, they didn't realize they had COVID, and COVID ran through my house. Now, for the younger people in my family, they did pretty good, but my wife, who has medical histories, she did not do so well. She ended up having a stroke because she got COVID. Now, God is good. She recovered just fine. You wouldn't know that she had had a stroke.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that can happen that people don't realize. You may be the young person who does absolutely wonderful with COVID and not have any issues. You're still walking around like nothing's wrong. But that family member that you're coming in contact with could potentially suffer irreparable damage and harm from it.
Yeah. I said my family's like playing Russian roulette.
Yes.
You know, you click, click, and you don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Okay. And let me just say to our audience, I want to encourage you, if you've not been vaccinated, to please do. I've had 4 shots already, and if there's another one available when the time comes, I want to take it. Because part of what I want to do is not be shut down from doing ministry, not be shut down from doing life with my family. And the vaccine enhances my chances of not contracting COVID while I'm in the hospital visiting, while I'm trying to comfort families, while I'm preaching funerals, while I'm at the graveside. Without that vaccination, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. And so, and like me, I know you don't want to stop living. And so let's get vaccinated. And if you have, check to see if you've had all your boosters and the latest shots that's out there. FEBA is available to do the shots. And I've reached out to the people at You Save It Drugs. They've got pharmacies around South Georgia, and they are ready and waiting on you to come by and get a vaccination as well. And one of the things we've explored is having vaccination clinics here at Mount Zion and other churches and places around the region. And if the demand is there, if you say you need it, we can help make that happen. We need to hear from you. And when you go to You Save It, when you go to FEBA, say I was listening to that program with Dr. Hurd and Pastor Simmons, and they told me that I needed to come be vaccinated. So please, please, go. Go as a family. Go as an individual. Just go. And now I want to switch to another topic that is very important to me as a pastor and to our community, and that is churches and where we are. Most of us in the African American community, we moved to a mask mandate when we came back for in-person worship. And now we're at a place where we are exploring moving from the mask mandate to making mask optional. And there are some churches that are looking at eliminating masks altogether. But here at Mount Zion, our stance is we are exploring making it optional. And so help us understand how wise is that? Is that too risky? Is it, and anything we do is a risk, is it safe enough for us to try to do that at this point?
Again, Pastor, you know, I think it's a situation where it's going to be up to each individual church organization how they're going to do that. If you have a church family that has done a good job with getting people vaccinated, it may be okay to go to a mask optional. But if you have a congregation that has not been vaccinated, it may not be the safest thing because, as I said, you don't necessarily know when someone may have COVID. As a physician, I'm gonna always err on the side of caution. So I'm gonna always wear my mask when I come into church. But for some other people, they may say, hey, I feel okay and I feel safe and I think I'm okay with not wearing a mask. I think we're getting to a point where we can say that might be okay. But again, I just want to go back and say, if you're wanting to do that, if you're wanting to be the person that says, I want to make sure that I don't have to wear a mask and I want to be able to worship and praise the way I want to, it's going to be almost prudent or vital that you're being vaccinated. Because again, when you have a church building that has 200, 300, 400 people in it, you have to assume there's going to be a couple of individuals in that congregation that could be positive at that time.
Right.
And so you want to protect yourself the best way possible. And so getting vaccinated is the best way to do that.
Okay. And you hit on a point. There may be one or two or more people in there that's vaccinated. And just because we take temperatures does not mean we've eliminated all of those possibilities.
No, exactly. As I said, symptoms evolve. So in the initial iteration of COVID, fever was one of the number one things that we look for. Well, that has evolved. Fever can still be present, but it doesn't have to be present for you to have COVID and be infectious with COVID. And so, yes, checking temperature is still something that I would recommend people do, but you're going to still have people that could slip through with that. And so, again, making sure that you have done everything in your power to protect yourself is going to be the right thing to do. So for individuals that may be masking, for other individuals that may be getting vaccinated, but you need to make sure that you're still being vigilant.
Okay. And so if I've been vaccinated and I have on my mask and I'm in a worship service and there's somebody else there who choose not to put a mask on, as long as I keep my mask on, as long as I've been vaccinated, I'm safe. It's not 100%,
Yes.
but it's a calculated risk that I'm not going to contract COVID from that person if they just happen to be positive.
Right. And this is why I tell my patients this all the time. There's only one thing that's been 100%, that was Jesus Christ. Everything else is fallible.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm not going to say to you today that if you're masked and you're vaccinated that you cannot catch COVID from someone. But you are drastically reducing those odds of catching COVID when you've done those things. And so if you're sitting next to someone who is unmasked and they happen to have COVID, there's a good chance that you won't catch it. I've had dozens of opportunities over the last, couple of months of patients coming into the office that didn't realize that they were COVID positive. But because I've been vaccinated and because I had on my mask, I did not contract COVID again because I had taken the necessary precautions. And so every individual, I think we got to a point where we were trying to take away people's individualism. So we still want to give people the ability to be an individual, but we also want to make sure that we're being responsible in doing that and giving everyone all the knowledge that they need to make the best decision for themselves.
Right. And my experience has been similar to yours. I have been here at church, at Mount Zion. I've been at families' homes for various situations and ministry situations, and I've gotten a call. Pastor, I am so sorry. I found out I got COVID, and we shook hands, or you hugged me, or just something, or I gave you some water, I did something. And they found out, and they called. But thank God I did not. And people have been in my office and said, oh, I'm so sorry I got COVID. But again, because I've been vaccinated, we had the mask on by the grace of God, I did not get it. And another thing I want to say to the churches and the people that are considering this, again, and when we came back to in-person service, we invested in the machines, and so we spray and we sanitize and we wipe the place down after service. And during service, if there are multiple people in any kind of space, we wipe it down. So even if we go to mask as optional or no mask at all, we still need to do that. We still need to wipe the doors down. We still need to spray. All of that still needs to be in place. All right. Want to switch subjects now. We got about 3 minutes left. Talk to us about the flu and the flu vaccine, and what are your thoughts around that, and any other issues out there that you see that we may need to be aware of?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Pastor, because I think as a community, and when I say community, I'm talking about the nation, we've kind of taken a step back from the flu. We had something that was a little bit more serious at the time, and we kind of put flu on the back burner. Well, flu is still deadly. Flu still kills, thousands of people a year. We have been fortunate over the last few years that because we've been masking, because we've been washing our hands, because we've been sanitizing, because we've been social distancing, the flu numbers kind of stayed low. Okay, and so for me as a scientist, what I hear is that, okay, those things work. Masking, washing hands, social distancing work to keep you from getting other types of airborne illnesses, not just COVID. So the same things that we're talking about with COVID, flu is still important in that regard as well. In terms of the vaccine, yes, if you are going to be around anyone, I would encourage you, unless you're going to be a hermit, living in your house, not leaving,
Yeah.
I would get the flu vaccine. For 65 and older, you need to get the high-dose flu vaccine, and that's very important because your immune systems don't work as well once you get older, and I don't mean that as a disparaging remark to those 65 and older, but the immune systems just don't work as well.
It is what it is.
You need to get the higher dose because we want to make sure that your body gives a good enough response so that you can build antibodies to that. Those under the age of 65, make sure that you are getting, now you get the regular flu dose vaccine, but you need to be getting the flu vaccine as well. It's not just for those people who have diabetes or heart disease or any of those kind of things. Everyone should get the flu vaccine unless you have an egg allergy or you've had an allergy to the vaccine in the past. And make sure that it's a real allergy.
Okay.
A lot of people will tell you, oh, I got so sick after getting that flu shot. No, what you did was your body had the immune response that it should have to the vaccine,
Okay.
which is you might get a low-grade temp, you might get body aches, but that's your body telling you that, hey, I recognize this virus, I don't like it, and I want to get rid of it. That's what happened with COVID as well,
Okay.
with the vaccine. So people, you very rarely find people that are allergic to the actual ingredients of the vaccine. What they're having is an immune response. Their body's having an immune response to the vaccine, which is actually what we want to happen.
Okay. Well, Dr. Hurt, we've come to the end of our time today. I want to thank you so much for sharing such a wealth of information with us. You've empowered us to make better decisions. And to those of you who are watching, thank you for watching. Please share this program with as many people as you can. And again, I want to say thank you to the people of Mount Zion for sponsoring this, and also to the Conference of National Black Churches under the leadership of Dr. Franklin Richardson and Dr. Boyce Kimber. And so thank you so much for being a part. And again, get vaccinated, not just for COVID, but for the flu. And again, make wise decisions when we are out in public. Let's still wash those hands.
Yes.
Let's still keep a safe distance. And we don't want to be negative, but just assume when we are out that anyone, including yourself, you could have COVID. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.